Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast, the only podcast for fans like you, by fans like you. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and I would like to welcome everyone to the NFL free agency period. Yes, we kind of got things off to a start on Monday at 12 o'clock noon when teams were permitted during what is called the legal tampering period to start talking to unrestricted free agents, but they could only talk to other teams' unrestricted free agents via their agents, or they're permitted to speak to agents or players of their own team up until 4 o'clock today, when the official free agency period begins and everything turns into the Wild West. So what we've been hearing over the last few days is a bunch of rumors or leaks or reports, unless there are official news coming from that team. And that has to deal with this legal tampering period that I was talking about. And if any of these terms kind of come off as a foreign language to you, you could always go over to steelcityunderground.com, where we have a free agency guide. Actually, we have two of them. We have the 2016 Pittsburgh Steelers free agency tracker that lists all of the players that are free agents for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season. It's going to list their position, their height, weight, their age, when they were drafted, if they were drafted, who took them, and what their cap hit was in 2015. So the reason that's important is it kind of gives you an idea of what the Pittsburgh Steelers might have to pay some of these players to stay on the roster for this year. Our other guide explains what a franchise tag is, because there's two different types of franchise tags. One will allow teams to have exclusive rights to a player, and the other one allows that player to still negotiate with other teams. And then there's a transition tag. So if any of that kind of sounds like I'm speaking another language, if it's kind of alien to you, head on over to our website and click on guides over at steelcityunderground.com. Should clear everything up for you. Back to the free agency frenzy, the Wild West that it is, or it's about to become. The legal tampering period, with all of these negotiations between teams and their own free agents, or between the actual agents or sport agents that negotiate contracts for the players from opposing teams, that began on Monday at 12 o'clock noon, and it's a lot different than what's about to happen at 4 o'clock today. This is when everything blows wide open, and now everyone can talk with everyone, and there's no more restrictions. There's no more, hey, you know what? This guy talked to this team 2 weeks earlier and kind of tampered with our ability to re-sign him. That's the reason the rules are in place. And we're already seeing a lot of moves by the Pittsburgh Steelers, a lot of great moves. We got, on Monday, I already discussed how the Pittsburgh Steelers had re-signed Heyward-Bey, the wide receiver, to a 3-year deal worth about $1 million apiece for each of those years, so $3 million. A little bit of a bump in pay, but not much for a solid veteran wide receiver who will contribute also on special teams. Gives this team insurance in case Martavis Bryant happens to slip again, fails a drug test, as we are well aware last year, suspended 4 games, ended up missing actually the first 5 because he was also injured. We don't know if that says any result to conditioning or whatever due to that suspension, but one could surmise that we don't want to be in that situation again. So Heyward-Bey, insurance against that policy. Heyward-Bey, insurance against the future possibly if the Steelers can't hold on to Marcus Wheaton. And there's always the rumors that are out there that the Steelers might trade Marcus Wheaton due to a lack of draft picks in this April's NFL draft. The Steelers have lost 2 of their draft picks due to conditions set for trades for kicker Josh Scobie last year, one that kind of really doesn't sit well with most of us because of how Josh Scobie underperformed and hurt this team several times at the beginning of the last year. And then you also have the trade that happened for cornerback Brandon Boykin, who's also on this free agent list for this year. So 2 draft picks down for the Steelers. They might make a move. So you got to look at it this way. A lot of people want to see what Sammy Coates has. Sammy Coates, the third, of course, being the 3rd round pick from the Steelers last year, young wide receiver. Just patience. Patience for Sammy, patience fans. You have to remember that not every rookie just kind of runs out there on the field. I think Martavis Bryant was kind of an exception to the rule, just because of how the chips fell when it came to injuries. If you recall, Lance Moore, that was on this team, was not healthy. I also want to say Darius Heyward-Bey himself, when he joined the Steelers roster 2 years ago, also wasn't healthy. So, and Martavis Bryant himself didn't even step on the field and see any action until about 7 games into the season. So that kind of explains where Sammy Coates sits in the pecking order right now. And it's just going to be some patience, because Antonio Brown went through this same thing. Emmanuel Sanders took about 3 seasons to get on the field, and Antonio Brown was kind of there too and really made his mark as a special teams player. So it's not that this team doesn't like Sammy Coates or that he's going to be a wasted draft pick or a draft bust. It's just one of those things where the player has to become acquainted with his surroundings, the playbook. He's going to be I think he's going to be more of a contributor headed into year 2 here. And if you've listened to any of our previous episodes, I discussed about picking up for the hole that's going to be left by Heath Miller, even though I don't think it's that big of a hole as far as receptions, receiving yards, 3rd downs. We could see more 4 wide receiver sets that include Sammy Coates as part of filling that gap. But back to the free agency. Darius Heyward-Bey, as you could tell, I love the signing. 3 years. Don't have to screw around with these 1-year deals anymore. And he was getting some feelers from other teams. Another guy that just got signed on Monday along with Darius Heyward-Bey was safety Robert Golden, who, if you combine the 2 signings for Heyward-Bey and Golden, that helps a third phase of football a lot of people don't think about as much, especially when it comes to the kickoff and kickoff returns being almost nullified by the newer rules set in place several years ago. But you still gotta hold on when it comes to punt returns, fake punts, and the whole 9 yards there. Literally, maybe the whole 10 yards or the whole 100 yards. But anyway, Robert Golden plays a lot of special teams, and I think he surprised a lot of the Steeler faithful when he was able to step in and actually perform better than the former kind of somewhat, I don't want to say highly touted because he was a 4th rounder, but Shamarko Thomas was the guy that was drafted to come in and was going to replace Troy Polamalu. Now, no one's ever going to replace Troy Polamalu, but you have to look at it from this standpoint that not only can Shamarko Thomas not get on the field, when he does get on the field, even in a special teams capacity, he's committing penalties and hurting this team. I think the ship has sailed on Shamarko. Robert Golden, a good signing because we also have Will Allen, that's a free agent, and I don't know where Will Allen's going to stand at this point, but it gives the Steelers yet another option so they don't have a whole lot of holes at any one specific position, and then they're backed into a corner of, well, we must sign a free agent, someone from another team to fill this position, fill this hole, fill this place on the roster of need. And when you have a need, is something that's going to cost you a lot more money, whether it is signing a more expensive draft pick not a draft pick, a free agent, or using a high draft pick to fill that spot on the roster. So the Steelers are signing players that are helping them when it comes to limiting that position of need, that position where now they have a little bit more bargaining power and say, well, we don't necessarily need, we're not desperate to go out and just pluck any wide receiver or any safety that's out there in free agency. And that comes full circle with cornerback, where everybody in Steeler Nation is just in a frenzy over the secondary. I get it. They were bad last year. It's part of the scheme, and it's also part of the personnel. You look at Antoine Blake. He gave up one quarter to one third. It was something like almost 1,300 yards. It was a record that was noted by Pro Football Focus that Antoine Blake set for giving up the most receiving yards by any individual cornerback. And when you're giving up that many yards in the whole picture or for the whole team, there really is only one weak link. The Steelers had previously already re-signed Ross Cockrell, who was picked up off of waivers the previous season from Buffalo. I thought he did pretty well. Probably going to have a whole nother topic on the secondary again, but the Steelers yesterday also announced that their top corner, William Gay, is also returning to the team, another 3-year deal. This was the top of my wish list, and I'm not going to lie. I was never much one for William Gay when he was first playing with this team, and also when they brought him back after he left for a year to go play in Arizona. And I'm just like, every time you saw a bad play, it was almost like the Antoine Blake deal where you're like, oh, it's William Gay. But according to Pro Football Focus last year, of the players who qualified with the minimum number of snaps and reps, William Gay was the only corner in the NFL to not give up a touchdown. And I find that remarkable. And if you're hearing this for the first time, you're probably thinking the same thing. Just, wow, is that right? Did he say that right? William Gay didn't give up a touchdown last year? And yes, it's true. It is true. So William Gay is a lot more valuable than some people may feel. And it gives you one of your other starting corners when you go with Ross Cockrell maybe being another, and you're gonna fill in maybe the nickel, that extra nickel defensive back, either with re-signing one of your other players like Brandon Boykin, perhaps last year's second-round draft pick in name escapes me for a second here. Oh, Senquez Golson, who was on the injured reserve last season. So you have a few players, and Doran Grant, of course, too, was another corner that the Steelers chose from Ohio State. He was a fourth-round draft pick last year that was finally getting a helmet by the end of the season. So you're looking at the Steelers are filling that out. So when I spoke in our last episode, I was also going through all of the free agents, the entire list of free agents, and I wanted to get one of two guys for the offensive line because I felt, okay, now we have a wide receiver. Our wide receiver depth is locked down. Okay, now we have another safety. We're doing pretty good there. We're probably going to pick up one more safety. Our corners, we pretty much have all the corners locked up now with William Gay. We could add another piece to the puzzle. The Steelers really only carry about four safeties, but they carry about maybe 4 to 5 safeties and 5 to 6 corners on their roster. All depends. So the Steelers are pretty set in terms of they're not going to have to be desperate to go out there and get a corner or a safety. And when we get to the draft period, after we see what shakes out after 4 p.m. today, they're going to be able to pretty much choose the best player available in those first few rounds of the draft. And that's how they build this team. So, but the one place of need in the two players that were free agents that I felt we needed at least one of them back. Supposedly there is a rumor out there already between Kelvin Beachum and Ramon Foster. So Kelvin Beachum, our starting left tackle who got placed on the injured reserve midway through last year, and then Ramon Foster, who started something like 87 games for the Steelers in his career, and I think in the last 4 seasons, 2 of those seasons he's played all 16 games, and he's never missed more than 1 or 2 games, I think, over the last 5 years. So Ramon Foster, your other interior lineman opposite on the other side of your Pro Bowl center, Marquise Pouncey, The opposite side of that is your also first-time Pro Bowler now, David DeCastro. So you're really going to solidify the interior of this line. I felt Ramon Foster was even more important than your left tackle, Kelvin Beachum, but both of them going into free agency, I said, I want at least one of these guys back because I don't like replacing two people on the line. We saw how that works for several years. Even last year, the Steelers were quite fortunate with the way replacing Pouncey with Cody Wallace and replacing Beachum with Alejandro Villanueva. They're pretty fortunate with the way that they've coached up these guys, and my hat's off to Mike Munchak. But you still need the talent, you still need a consistency, and you got a guy in Ramon Foster who's consistently healthy. There's a rumor that the Steelers are negotiating a deal, and we may even hear about it before 4 p.m. today. You may even hear about it before I even get this podcast officially cut and released, that Ramon Foster returns for a deal that makes him pretty much a lifetime Steeler because he's already 30 years old as of last January. So very good. Pretty much hits my wish list with the 4 signings that the Steelers had, and there are also some speculation out there that we might even get Kelvin Beachum too. And my feeling is that I don't hold any ill will against Kelvin Beachum. If you think about it, a left tackle, left tackles are a commodity in the NFL. There's something that they're a position that's going to get paid a lot of money. They're the blindside protector for your quarterback. And a lot of the knock on Kelvin Beachum and the reason he was a 7th round draft pick and probably one of the greatest steals in the draft that the Steelers have had in recent years, barring Antonio Brown, that everybody knows went in the 6th round. When you look at Kelvin Beachum, kind of the knock on him was he was undersized, but his technique and his ability, he is certainly more than NFL capable, and he was probably looking at a huge payday for this upcoming free agency period in this season had he not got hurt. So he took the gamble of, instead of maybe restructuring and extending his contract as the front office likes to do heading into the last year of every one of their marquee players' contracts and anyone that they're looking to keep for the long haul, Kelvin Beachum and his agent were probably looking for a little bit more money, maybe a little more security, like a higher guarantee, or maybe even more years on his contract. And the Steelers, from a business standpoint, aren't necessarily saying, hey, we don't like you, Kelvin Beachum, but they're also looking ahead at all the other players they have to pay money to. And there was just kind of that gamble of, okay, we'll wait and see. And that wait and see now is kind of turned into, well, this is a guy that's now coming off of a gruesome knee injury. And can he perform and play to the level that he previously did? So the gamble and the risk, unfortunately, not in Kelvin Beachum's favor. But as we've seen with many other players, I feel that these athletes and these professional football players work as hard as they can to always be on that field, always be 100%. And I would expect Kelvin Beachum to come back at 100% health and be able to play, hopefully at the same level that he has. So that's kind of the speculation that other NFL teams are probably having. And when you're looking at it from a security standpoint, the best move for Kelvin Beachum might be to come back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the best move for the Steelers front office is probably going to be to sign Beachum to a 1-year deal as to not lock themselves into something long-term like a Lamar Woodley, for example, or a Cortez Allen, where the player ends up on the injured reserve in the subsequent years after signing that contract, and you're still paying them even when they're off your roster for a year or two. And that is called dead money on the cap. And when you're playing players that aren't on your roster, you don't have that money to spend on getting other free agents. So when you look at it from that viewpoint, I would be ecstatic to hear not only the official news that Ramon Foster returns today, a much more important piece, I feel, as he's been consistently healthy and one of the and the best linemen we've had really over the last several years. If you look at the whole body of work, about discrediting DeCastro or even Pouncey, but you look at what's happened with injuries with both of those guys. David DeCastro, even in his rookie season, not being able to get on the field, and then Pouncey catching some friendly fire over a few seasons here too. So Ramon Foster is just a rock. He's a guy that I'd be ecstatic to have back. I would also be happy, and I'm also hopeful that the Steelers could go out and grab Kelvin Beachum as well, extend a few of our own guys. We don't have to go out and make any frivolous moves in free agency, and we've already covered the main basis, adding the depth at the needed positions. Attacking this offensive line means that the Steelers are not going to be desperate to have to go out and sign another offensive lineman or draft one early in the 2016 NFL draft. And that, I feel, is a tip of the hat to the Steelers front office and their general manager, Kevin Colbert, because whatever it is that they're doing, along with any of their coaching staff and everyone else involved in this process, they have definitely convinced their core group of players that we have a contender we could play for. This is a system you want to stay in, work with us, and they are. And I'm loving every minute of this so far. But stay tuned, because at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, today, the roller coaster ride truly begins.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.